Good morning. Thanks for joining the webinar. And today we're going to be discussing what CASS 15 means for payments, right? So this is obviously a big topic for payment institutions and EMIs that are in the UK, and is one that is moving up the agenda really quickly. We were discussing, people are saying, oh, 29 days, but it's not 29 working days. So it's pretty soon. My name is Vasco Rodrigues. I'm CMO at Aurum Solutions, and I'll be hosting today's session. I'm very happy to be joined by a brilliant panel. We have Clément, which is our head of solutions at Aurum. We have Dmitriy, the chief information officer at Unlimit. Nicholas, managing director and head of digital service at Cosegic, also former FCA manager. And we have Vessi, the CASS oversight officer and safeguarding accountable owner at Wise. So I think between all of us here, there's a great mix of experience across software, infrastructure, regulation, and safeguarding. But I'll let everyone introduce themselves properly in a few minutes. But I just want to say that what I want to do today is keeping things as practical as possible. So we will look at new requirements for payment firms, how to design scalable compliance processes that suit every business, and how strong safeguarding practices can help create resilience, trust, and also a competitive advantage. So thank you again for being here, and let's get started.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dmitriy. So a brief intro for me. I've spent the last 10 years within the CASS and safeguarding space. I started my journey in external audit and moved into consulting, where I've advised firms from authorizations to control implementations, remediation programs, as well as technical interpretation of the standards. And for the last year, I have joined Wise within the journey for transitioning within the CASS 15 space as their safeguarding and CASS oversight officer as well.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining us. Clem?
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Clément Bourcart. I head up the solutions team here at Aurum Solutions. And my key role here is to try and define some products that are hopefully going to be helpful for clients across different industries, including payments and including, of course, CASS 15, which is today's topic. So really keen to discuss and hear people's thoughts about what the key challenges are and learn about how we can help, really.
Thank you. Dmitry?
My name is Dmitriy Disskiy. I'm Chief Product and Technology Officer at Unlimit, regulated electronic money institution. I spent almost 15 years in fintech, and I'm responsible for the product development and the technology solution behind it.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining us. And last but not least, Nicholas?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Nicholas Webb. I'm Managing Director for Digital Finance here at Cosegic. Cosegic is a boutique consultancy firm with just over 100 consultants working across a range of areas, including investments, consumer credit, payments, e-money, and crypto. As Vasco said, prior to joining, I spent just over a decade at the Financial Conduct Authority in a range of roles, but very much leading and shaping the FCA and the UK approach to payments and e-money, both from a public policy perspective and also forming the supervision function, which many firms will be familiar with today. And in some respects, you can blame me for where we are now with CASS. So I was overseeing the creation of the next gen regime for payments at one point, and as part of that proposed using the CASS framework as a model for safeguarding. So I'll be willing to have all the tomatoes thrown at me later today. But we've been actively working with a range of firms to help prepare them for their CASS implementation, doing historic audits under the current regime and also preparing them for the future, safeguarding gap analysis, as well as kicking the tires on their remediation to make sure they're ready for May.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We'll definitely deep dive into your expertise also from the FCA side and understanding what it is to be on the side of a regulator. But I think we need to start, by the basics. What is CASS 15? What are the new requirements that payment institutions and EMIs need to be compliant with? And what does it change in terms of safeguarding for payment firms? So maybe I'll just jump to Clem because I know he's been doing a lot of research on this. So yeah, Clem, can you tell us a bit more about what is CASS 15, what are the requirements, and what does it actually change for the payments institutions?
Sure. Thanks, Vasco. So what we're seeing from our clients in the space who have been operating under the UK FCA license for a while is the biggest change really here is around safeguarding of client funds. So having a robust process whereby you as an EMI or as a payment institution can demonstrate confidently that on any given day what your client position is. So how much client funds do you actually owe across your client base? That introduces a range of complexities because you basically have to do a daily kind of constant checks between your bank balances, your internal ledger systems, identify any variances on a regular daily basis and remediate those variances fairly quickly. So D+1 is kind of the FCA requirement around having to resolve especially any shortfalls in your safeguarding funds within a day after the receipt of the funds. So being able to do this at scale requires some automation, some good controls around your data processes and data quality coming from, again, the external side, the banks, but as well as your internal ledgers. And when you add cross-currency complexities and the scale of essentially your operation, that becomes quite tricky to manage. And I guess Vasco will be able to talk more on that because Wise, I guess, is probably a perfect example of some of those complexities there. But effectively for a payment firm who hasn't had to comply, so basically under the UK FCA license, this is a brand new territory in terms of safeguarding client funds, having those daily checks in place, comparing balances between the funds physically held at your safeguarding bank accounts, which now have to be due diligence on a regular basis, as well as different compliance activities that have to take place on those bank accounts and those banking partners, and then comparing those funds with what you think you owe clients from your internal ledgers, and basically running that check and identifying variances and acting on those variances rapidly. So it's definitely a new challenge, I guess, for payment firms in different ways, operationally, from the compliance perspective, tracking all the different data in different places and bringing everything in one end-to-end process. And that's where I guess we can help with some of our solutions that we've designed specifically for this, and probably touch on that later. But yeah, if I were to summarize, this basically the daily safeguarding checks in place to ensure that you have the right amount of money sitting in bank accounts to cover your ongoing client liabilities across your safeguarding currencies. And there's a piece about centrally managing any breaks and breaches identified on the back of those safeguarding checks. As well as a monthly report to the FCA, which is a standard set of figures that have to be calculated on a 30-day, on a basis of every 30-day period that you are reporting on. And that in itself is, from a compliance perspective, is a task. It's not simple. It's not something that's easy figures to kind of generate. You have to have kind of process around it to generate those figures accurately. Make sure you're reporting on time, the correct figures, and really have that whole end-to-end process in place, really. So I guess these are some of the high-level kind of key changes from a UK perspective.
And I'm assuming that also, Nicholas, you've been working with payment firms and EMIs. this is not the first CASS regulation that comes up. The CASS regulation has been with us for a long time. And obviously this adds a bit more work and people need to reassess the processes they currently have in place. So it's like when companies are assessing their gaps between, the CASS compliance and reporting they had to do before versus the one they have to do now, what are the gaps that you see them spotting more frequently?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's important to remember is that the principles of what's being required under the CASS regime, they're the same. So there's been no change really from the safeguarding regime to where we are with CASS after May. You need to have segregation, you need to have clear accounts, you need to have records, you need to do reconciliation, etc. In fact, some of it's been reduced actually, the burden on the firms. But what we do now have is greater transparency. So the FCA has been very clear that time after time, firms weren't doing what they needed to do correctly. We've seen multiple examples of firms failing and it taking far too long and too much money, resulting in ultimately clients getting nothing back or pennies on the pound when they do come out of an insolvency process. So the detail that's now in the CASS regime, that simply reflects what supervisors were already asking and expecting of firms when they were engaging with them previously. The benefit now is that we have absolute transparency around that and slightly more prescriptive and detailed rules and guidance for firms to follow. So they've got a better chance of getting it right first time. So we should recognise that. Some of the key gaps, obviously there's new elements. So the resolution pack is new and firms are having to build that from scratch. All too often, I think firms aren't recognising the material lift that is needed to develop that resolution pack. It's no longer a static document that sits on the shelf. It does need to be updated in near real time and on a daily basis to reflect the current position of the firm. So that does require a build. Some of the other new aspects, third-party due diligence. So as it is today, the FCA provided guidance that firms needed to do due diligence. There's now more prescriptive expectations around what that looks like. And that's challenging, right? It's hard to get a safeguarding account, especially in the UK. Often firms just have to go with who they can find and who's willing to give them an account. But ultimately, you do now need to have an objective set of standards that you're assessing those third-party providers against and able to evidence that you have assessed them against that. And you've got documents to prove that, and you continue to do that on an ongoing basis as well. So that'll be a key change and a key gap for firms. Ultimately, one of the biggest gaps that we see today under the current regime, and that I think will be a real challenge for firms going forward, comes down to auditability. So yes, many firms had to do safeguarding audits under the current regime. They're not to the same standard as a CASS audit. Everyone accepts that when CASS auditors come in, they are going to find a lot of problems. And the FCA in its recent sector priorities document recognised that fact. They acknowledge that while some firms are preparing, many firms need to do more to get ready. And when they are over the line, they're going to find a lot of issues through that process. But the fundamental issue with a CASS audit, as well as when we're doing audits today, is that whilst a firm might be doing the right thing in practice, all too often they don't have documentary evidence to prove they did do the thing the way they said they did it at the time. So there's a gap between what's written down in paper and then being able to prove what you are doing. Being able to categorically show who, what, why, when for all decisions that were taken, for all breaks, for all escalations, etc. That's a fundamental shift for a lot of firms, and that's where we're seeing a real mindset shift is needed and a challenge for many firms to put into practice. Hopefully having automated solutions can help bridge that gap for some of those firms.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we have Vasco and Dmitriy here. So first, the question is, do these challenges check and what are you guys actually doing, to overcome them and to make sure that you are CASS 15 compliant?
Well, Excel won't work anymore, that's for sure. So the new requirements related to the immutable audit trail is certainly changed the paradigm because every reconciliation run must be time-stamped, signed off, and impossible to alter. So any serious company who is planning to be CASS 15 compliant must implement appropriate systems where the audit evidence with immutable logs and the version controls are implemented. So that put a lot of pressure and certainly requires time. It does affect delivery and it does affect the culture within the company.
So I was going to say some of the challenges when you're in-house are actually thinking that you have a lot of time for CASS 15 implementation. And yes, you do, if that was the only thing that you were doing at the time. But when you're a safeguarding function that tries to balance product innovation, market launches, global day-to-day BAU footprint, with current safeguarding audit season also happening to be upon us, it doesn't feel that long anymore. And for us, on that point around documentation, actually our starting point was, let's just take a step back. Let's not just jump into the detail as the first thing we do and start just executing and changing for the sake of changing. But it was taking that critical look and over your infrastructure. What are you doing? How are you doing it? And how does it align or not? And being really honest with yourself where you're falling short. And defining the gap. Is it a lack of process? Is it you have a process, but you've not documented it enough, or it doesn't have enough auditability or visibility if someone was to just walk in today for you to be able to show them? Or is it a case that it's something that actually we are pretty much there, but we need a bit more enhancement of how we do it? And then prioritize on what is the biggest uplifts versus the smallest. And actually recognizing that once you do this, you have to translate it to the business, because a lot of the processes that you're wanting to change or tweak or create sit outside of your safeguarding team. They sit with operations, they sit with treasury, they sit with finance, and it's educating people who do not speak safeguarding as to what this means. So a lot of our initial time was spent on translating what we do versus what we should do, where the gaps are, and what does it practically mean for people to implement them and secure that time within other teams in order to meet the deadline. So that is the challenge and the crux of it from an in-house perspective. And I think, Nicholas, you mentioned due diligence was one. My view on this one was the initial views were, well, the initial regulation was everyone who is involved within the safeguarding arrangements, right? It's just the definition here changed. And for us, this is one of the areas of uplift as well, because it's where you receive relevant funds. We are a global firm with a global network. Therefore, our third-party due diligence has expanded quite materially. And the challenge there is, we oversee in my team around 15 jurisdictions, all with different requirements around due diligence, some more stringent than others. And I think that balance between local compliance, but building global scalable processes and explaining to teams why we need an uplift in a global process because of a single jurisdiction, and why does it still make sense from a customer protection, from getting to the right outcome. It's also been one of the key challenges as well. So starting from a local problem, but solving it in a global way.
Yeah. It's interesting because there's a cultural shift, and also like when you're speaking about processes that impact different departments is obviously a challenge, especially for companies like yours, which have hundreds, thousands of employees. From your experience doing this so far, obviously because this is not the first time you have to change processes and to educate people in regulations. Like what would be the best practices that you could share from your experience, or even, Nicholas, the best practice that you've seen so far in other businesses?
I guess from my perspective, and this goes beyond where I currently work, right? That's what I've done for the last 10 plus years, right? It's try to break it down to what is the core principles that we're trying to achieve? Why does it align with our direction, strategic direction as a firm? How does it help our mission? How does it underpin our values? And then break it down into simple deliverable tasks with the explanation of why. Providing stakeholders the visibility of, if you would like to know more about the area, here is the regulatory business analysis that shows you exactly why we need to do this. But also, if you would like to just understand what is it you need to do in the first place in a more accessible language, there's also this version for you as well, and continuing to be an effective lobbyist. So I see my job as a lobbyist for safeguarding. I shout from the rooftops how important it is. to every single department that has a process that can impact safeguarding, so that we build that muscle memory and that culture that, oh, have I thought about safeguarding today? Why haven't I thought about that today? And getting it in front of people's minds. So that work continues and it's ongoing and it goes beyond CASS 15. It's just part of what makes a good, resilient safeguarding environment that survives any one individual person. Is just built as an ecosystem of knowledge at the right places.
Yeah, I think Ves is right there in the need to break it all down into the actual process. Take that step back and really understand what you do and how your firm does it, because often things become fragmented, siloed, especially as firms get larger. You lose that knowledge of really end-to-end what's happening. So you need that picture to begin with. I think the other key point that Vessi was talking about there is no one individual can deliver this or is responsible for it, although Vessi is responsible as the safeguarding individual. But to actually put it into practice on the ground, it does require the whole company coming together. And obviously we've got extremes here. So Vessi, global firm, thousands of people. A large number of firms in the sector are significantly smaller, and you could count the number of employees on one hand. So it's a bit late now, but taking the time doing this as early as possible in the process to maximize the ability rather than panicking at the end and trying to push it over the line. Bringing everyone that is involved tangentially and directly in the safeguarding process and the flow of funds to the table, recognizing it's not just the compliance officer's problem. The board needs to be involved in this. As Vessi said, treasury, finance teams, etc. They all need to be involved in what this looks like and how it works in practice. For smaller and medium-sized firms that are facing that bandwidth challenge, what I would say is don't overcomplicate it. So on the one hand, technology is great. AI will get you so far, but please don't go out and try and build your framework using an AI solution or an off-the-shelf solution. It won't reflect the nuance of your business. The fantastic thing about our sector is that whilst on the front end, things look very similar, when you dig beneath the hood, every business is structured differently. They all operate in a different way. They all use different permissions, etc., to achieve something that's the same on the outside. So you need to ensure that the framework you put in place reflects your actual business model, your actual operating structure. I'd also encourage firms not to gold plate. If you put it into the framework, especially now we've got CASS audits coming along, you need to make sure you're actually doing it in practice. So don't put in the framework, you're going to do loads of amazing things, when in reality, that's not what's going to happen on the ground. Ensure that both practice and policy align to one another would be a key point from my perspective. And also bring in external experts, of course. We've built tools to help you with it. We've done the control mapping. One of my guys spent weeks going through every single rule and requirement, mapping it out. And as Vessi said, turning it into language that people understand, not just regulatory speak. That's a key point.
Yeah, just bouncing back on that culture piece, I guess the big point around change management, I guess, again, maybe more so for me than large firms. Like Vessi, you mentioned having those communication materials around what needs to be done and why, and that business case behind it. I'm just curious, what was the key pushback that you maybe found in terms of getting people to buy into that vision, that this is not just compliance for compliance sake and avoiding some licensing issues or fines, but it's actually something we can use as a competitive advantage. We can use for our own benefit as well as a company.
I'm quite lucky because we do live and breathe our values every single day, and safeguarding is around our customers. It's built to support our customers' experience. And from that perspective, the fact that the firm was looking for an accountable officer quite much in advance of the regulations actually coming into place, so that that person, me now, is in a position where they understand the business so that they can positively transition it into this CASS 15 space, was a good indication for me to join. And I would say that I don't get pushback in terms of why we need to do it. Everyone is on board here as to why we need to do it. It's more about that constructive challenge of how do we get there and what's proportionate? What is actually a smart way of doing it? Is there any nuance in the regulation that can help us have a competitive advantage, and exploring those? So actually opening up your subject matter area to other subject matter specialists that have maybe not as much SME in expertise in safeguarding, but more around, how do we place safeguarded funds? How do we manage that portfolio of, guarantee, or is it cash, or is it HQLAs? So opening that up to a wider forum and getting people's inputs on how they would like to shape their area is also as important. So I've been very lucky from that perspective. And I've also always started from the point where wherever I introduce CASS 15, it's like, it's not either or. It's not either you have regulation or you have growth. They go together and you grow sustainably. It's how we then implement it and build sustainable processes around it. And that gets us there. It's not a blocker. It's actually an enabler.
And I think that's a key point for a lot of, especially smaller firms to understand that might be looking to exit at some point in the next few years. Compliance is now a multiplier of value, and it's, we're seeing increasingly purchasing firms wanting due diligence done on the acquisition entity to ensure that it is meeting the standards, and that shortly after acquiring, they're not going to have the regulator come in, find a whole load of problems, have to spend a whole load of money to fix those issues, or worse comes to worse, place restrictions on and close them down. And that the thing with safeguarding or CASS, that is a reason why the firm puts restrictions on businesses. They will be restricted from onboarding any new customers. They'll be required to exit all funds they currently hold and stop doing regulated activity for, it can be a substantial period of time sometimes. And that really ultimately hurts the survivability of the firm. So it's a serious issue, and it's worth investing early and upfront to get it right.
Yeah. And Dmitry, from your experience, how are you making decisions in terms of, architecturing these processes and even information in the company and data to make sure that there are processes that are implemented but also carried through, and that things just, don't stop moving forward in compliance?
Well, as Nicholas just mentioned, it's extremely important to have such information on your radar way in advance. And our process started last year, and it was part of the roadmap. And for any technical domain, it's extremely important to be aligned with the business functions, with the treasury, with the compliance, and we share the common goal. But we deliver the nuts and bolts. We deliver the actual systems. For us, was a difficult decision to make. Is to either we are doing it internally as a solution, technical solution, which would fulfill the required functions, because in the CASS 15, a lot of unobscured technical details which you need to implement, and for us was important to make that right choice. Are we going to select the third-party tools, like great tools from Aurum, for example, because the Aurum does provide excellent solution, or do develop internal systems and tools which support the compliance? We selected the second, but the alignment with the compliance, making sure that the technical solution actually does fulfill the business flow is extremely important. How we achieve that, we run the two systems in parallel, and they still run in parallel. We just selected, we're working on the smaller scales on the new system, and we're ensuring that we are getting exactly the same results from both systems.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you feel like that is, a gap between what third parties are offering versus how that offering can be adjusted to the reality of the companies? Is like when I'm assuming that you've seen demos from different providers, or that when you look, you speak with different companies. Do you think there's a gap between the market offering versus the customization of the process and flow that you as a company require from this offering, and that's what took you to something else?
Again, I will refer to the Nicholas' wisdom. Each company is unique.
Mm-hmm.
Each company has million different smaller processes, requirements. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to get exactly what you need from the third-party vendor. And if you already have R&D internally, it's much easier to build it and grow on it. Just ensure your continuous, well, in this case, compliance or adherence to the business process.
Yeah, and that's something I'm
But again, this process selecting, there are a lot of processes, so we're not going to go there on the ROI and so on and so forth. But
of course,
yeah.
And I guess like fintech in general has this very strong development power. Historically, they always hire a lot of big dev team, strong dev team as well, that allows people to, in certain cases build their own solutions. In other cases, they rely on third parties, and that's also something we've experienced. But the dates is coming up. Do you guys feel like there is still something that is a bit unclear that you will probably figure out in the next couple of days? Like there is something that you still hope to improve. Where are you at the moment?
We have 2 dates, right? The first is 6 months submission. So the first audit obviously will show that's we are on the track, but that's until we'll be audited and we will submit and we'll receive the feedback.
Bessie.
I guess from my perspective is like we are definitely in the final stage of execution over the transition, and there is a lot of requirements that we must meet, and we will. There will always continue to be areas of improvement and areas of enhancements. For me, that is a point around documentation. We'll always need improvement. We'll always need enhancement. As Dmitry said, yes, and ultimately we will know about it from the external audit. But what we are doing here is also we're involving our second line and third line colleagues post-launch so that they have a population to choose from and certain processes to test to make sure that we're getting it right and getting that feedback internally much, much sooner than the first audit cycle to make sure that we have indeed transitioned successfully to the new regime. There will always be areas of technical challenge, right? So this is what I will say. We have done our judgments. We have documented where there's a bit more wiggle room in the rules or ambiguity, or which is left open for a reason, right? Because we are different firms. We do have different pipework under the hood, right? So we need to make sure that we apply them correctly for our business and business model. So again, from my perspective, I'll be more interested to see how those judgments get challenged, both internally and externally by the auditor, and see if they hold, which I'm very confident in. But again, that's always a good and useful perspective to have someone external looking, or at least independent from your processes, looking into that. So yeah, from my perspective, we are there. We'll always enhance, we'll always improve, we'll launch new products, we will launch new markets, we'll always learn from those previous experiences, and we'll always find something that we can get better next time around.
I think that's right. I think in the regime itself, I would argue is relatively clear and settled. The challenge is whether or not individual firms are willing to accept what the rules and requirements say, or whether they view them as a problem and a barrier and therefore want to fight them against the whole way through. And it's that mindset shift again, which is going to be determinative. The areas I think where we still have a degree of grey is the perpetual challenge of regulatory intent and theory versus practical reality. So it's all very well and good having these nice, clear rules. However, as Vessi said, firms are incredibly operationally complex, and it is not the case that you can simply comply yes or no to many of the issues. You do have to have judgment-based decisions, meaning as the auditors come in, it's going to be the first time that they're looking at the sector. The way that the payments industry works with high volume, high velocity transactions is very different to how CASS has been applied in other sectors. So that there are material learnings there for auditors. There will be learnings for the FCA when they start to see all of the audit findings. Everyone recognises that it's going to be a little bit of a car crash and that almost every firm is going to have findings, and many will probably be material findings. But it will be about how the FCA then takes a pragmatic approach and adapts to the reality of trying to comply on the ground and what genuinely is a serious issue which is going to result in harm versus a technical issue or a spirit issue that aligns behind it. I think on the audit side, we do now fortunately have at least the interim guidance from the Financial Reporting Council. So auditors are going to have a sense of what they need to do. But of course, that isn't final. Now, I don't think there'll be material changes in the final guidance that comes out in 2027, but that is a shifting sand piece that we need to look through. And I mean, on that point, I would also say that if firms haven't done so already, I would strongly encourage them to read the FRC guidance. It's not really targeted at the industry, but you'll get a much stronger sense of where you need to be making improvements, making uplifts, etc., and what auditors are actually going to be testing for. So, auditors are going to, the bit that made me chuckle slightly is that the auditors are going to have to take a view on the culture of honesty and ethical behavior in the firm, for example. So how is that going to be demonstrated and evidenced as they run through it? And the granularity into ICT controls. Most firms haven't had ICT control testing previously as part of their safeguarding audits, which maybe we'll touch upon that in a second as well. So that's going to be a new change for people. And it's those areas of where the rubber hits the road that I think are going to throw up the areas of ambiguity that are going to need a little bit more time to adapt to over the next couple of years.
I think on the back of that as well, Nicholas, I remember when the FRC issued the CASS audit standards in 2019 for the investment firms, so when they revamped it, a lot of soft requirements came in to force, so that the entire of the investment services industry now complies with, as if they were proper requirements written in the FCA handbook, which is around having and maintaining a product mapping, a control mapping, a rules mapping, and an applicability mapping, and how you apply those requirements, as well as a proper risk framework and risk management tools around safeguarding risk or CASS risk at the time. So those soft requirements from the guidance will definitely translate into bare minimum expectation within the next couple of years. And firms will have to also uplift on that point. So which is where my point on always enhance, always improve will come into play. And my two penny for auditors to be thrown here. If you are a payment firm that is experiencing an audit firm that is made up of investment CASS auditors, take them on the journey, make them understand your business, make them understand how payments works, get them on board, because it is different. The dynamics of a payment and e-money firm are very different than the dynamics of an investment firm. And therefore that agility and the speed with which we move money is much different than an investment firm. So actually translating that to your auditor via process flows, via procedures, via descriptions of your products, by just talking them through the journey, even showing them on the app how your product works and interacts and how that results in books and records in the back is going to be a very essential part of surviving your first year audit under these rules.
Yeah, it's going to be a laborious process. And I mean, to the point we were saying earlier about bandwidth, I think firms need to recognize that and start blocking out the time now. These things are going to be considerably higher workloads than what's been taken previously. So trying to do that while do everything else to keep the business afloat is going to take time.
Yeah. And we started this webinar with a very interesting take that obviously, in tech, we all believe Excel is not going to cut it anymore. And one of the biggest challenges in terms of processes, well, besides all that we discussed here already, is definitely, the audit trail and making sure there is, accurate, immutable register of everything that was done. And pairing that with AI, which is a bit of a black box sometimes, and people are using it in a way that, there's no traceability, there's no track record of what the agent does. And assuming that obviously all of us are going to leverage technology to automate a lot of these processes, what has been your approach to it? Like, what are you considering when implementing this kind of automation and making sure that it has audit trail? What is happening inside, and what are the decisions being made?
I'll leave it to Dmitry,
go.
maybe first as the actual techie amongst us.
Approach is we leverage different technology. We received data from our proprietary payment system. We stream it to the data lake, and we do the deduplication. We clean the data, then we throw it to the Snowflake, and we analyze it in the Snowflake. So we leverage the solutions which are already available, though we're using our internal developers to develop pipelines and all the mechanics in order to make sure that we can match the data. Also, in the our data lake, we match the data from the banks, because we are pulling the data directly in real time from the APIs, and not just from the banks, but also from our ledger. And that process is produced. That's not API. That's in standard database layer, which allows us to produce and save and keep immutable records readily available for auditors for any compliance check. That's how it works.
Yeah, I think when selecting a partner or looking into the tools, you say you need to understand what sits beneath it. So one of the challenges or mistakes that a lot of firms make on any technology is simply plug and play. And that is where things are going to go wrong. So when selecting a tool to help in this space, because I agree, for very small firms with low transaction volumes, Excel will probably still be the solution. But they need to put sufficient controls around that to ensure they can get through the audit process later. But explainability is going to be key. So needing to understand yourself how the solution actually works, be in a position where you can sit down in front of the auditor or the regulator and talk to them about how the solution you've brought in works and the process that it actually runs through. Auditability, again, is going to be key. How easy is it to actually reconstruct the outcome that the solution led to, so you can see the working outs behind the scene? Complexity, recognizing the complexity and the specifics of your business and being comfortable in how the solution actually plugs those gaps. And you're not just fudging it because it does 80% or 90% of what you're looking for, if that 10% is going to be key and critical. Ensuring it can devise a full reconciliation. Now, this is one of the key areas where firms historically have got it wrong, frankly. Not really understanding internal versus external reconciliation. So on this occasion, being able to clearly understand how it's mapping customer balances to internal ledgers, to safeguarding requirements, and then the same on the external side as well. Transparency of flow of funds, being clear that the system enables you to identify relevant funds, identify in-flight funds, identify settled funds on the other side of that. And then finally, oversight, being clear that the system is going to allow for visibility of breaks, unallocated funds, etc. Does it build in escalation workflows? Can it be used to produce the necessary MI that you're going to need both for the monthly reporting, but also for board level oversight and management oversight as well? If you've got a solution that can tick all of those boxes, I'd sign it up pretty quickly. But being sure that it does it in the way you need it to work for your firm and your risk appetite is what's key.
So oh, sorry.
Sorry. Go ahead, Vasco.
I was about to say, it's the solution is the cherry on the top at the end of the day, right? So if you don't have the correct books and records, if you do not have an understanding of your flows and funds, of your start and stop of safeguarding, to be able to produce the inputs into those reconciliations, the tool can be the greatest one available on the market, and it will still not feel like the right fit. So getting the basics right is always the most important thing, because if you get all of these basics throughout the day right, when it comes to your reconciliations, you have valuable data in and a valid output out. And also the other element of any solution is, yes, okay, we can get the solution working, we can implement it, assume we have all the correct data, but it's that ongoing maintenance, it's that agility to change alongside your business models and your growth at your firms is important, and the serviceability. So what do we get on an ongoing basis in terms of if the solution goes down, if there's breaks for some reason? Are there validation checks that happen in the solution beforehand that make sure that whatever I see in my database ends up being what is in the reconciliation, so I can trust the output? It's all of these small questions that you need to ask yourself along the life cycle of using the tool, not just the pre-launch and launch push that usually gets a lot of your attention as oversight. It's that boring stuff that happens day to day afterwards. It's after the flashy project of embedding it is over as well. And I'm sure Clément has a lot of experiences going through that state at the moment as well with firms.
Yeah, pretty much. I was going to, just bounce on that. Basically, what all of you are saying are some of the key components that we've built into a new tool that we've been working on over the past 4-6 months, effectively helping payment firms comply with the core of the CASS 15 requirements. So effectively having a tool that lets you automatically bring data in. So one of the key challenges we understand from payment firms is just often the manual process and the time-consuming nature of purely getting data from the external bank account, as well as from the internal ledger systems, and basically bringing that into a system that can automatically run those balance level checks between the resource and the requirement figures, both internally and externally, on a daily basis, and then basically automate the process of having visibility on where do you have a surplus, where do you have a shortfall, where are you within your threshold levels, where compliance can be ascertained, and having a full trail behind that. So practically speaking, having a tool you can log in day to day that automates that process, getting data from the bank accounts, the safeguarding bank accounts, alongside with the relevant compliance metadata for those accounts, making sure that compliance information is in place in the first place, and then also bringing data from the internal ledgers, different parts of the ledgers, depending on the rec that's being done, and then daily running that process to have a clear view of breaches, potentially breaches that may be happening on any kind of shortfall or surplus that is not remediated in the relevant time frame. But also, like you say, it's not kind of a case of having a plug and play vanilla solution that doesn't reflect the processes of each and every client. So within that tool, having that oversight where you are still very much in charge as, let's say, the compliance officer of the given company, of what gets flagged as a reportable breach, of setting a specific SLA for resolution depending on the type of breaks that the system identifies, of still digitally signing off and approving the safeguarding position on a day-to-day basis. So it's not just a case of a black box tool that does something in the background and then you kind of step back from it with no accountability. You very much, as the payment company using our tool, retain that accountability. It gives you the full oversight of what you need to see and gives you the power to validate things that need to be approved or need to be escalated using the escalation workflows that we have built in, which is something that Nick touched on earlier as well. So those key components are there, but they're customizable to suit the specific process of the given payment company effectively. Alongside, as again, something we touched upon earlier, the key management information and insights around the values of unallocated funds, the key types for the key reasons for why breaks happen on the system, which again, clients should be categorizing and kind of being on top of, and then tracking these insights, not just day to day, but also surfacing patterns over time. So is it the case that you have a specific issue causing breaks to happen over time or during specific times of the year, which could be a number of reasons, but the system allows clients to basically track what those reasons are and report on them on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And then, of course, having the ability to automatically generate the figures that need to eventually go into the monthly FCA submission, I think is a big plus, because speaking to payments companies who are getting ready for this, that would have been a big headache. And I think the FCA themselves estimated it would have taken a number of hours for a compliance manager per staff to just pull in those figures on a monthly basis, whereas having a full log of, again, those internal and external safeguarding reconciliations in one place, the value of the breaks that have been identified and resolved over the past 30-day period, and then being able to do right calculations on the back of those figures to then pretty much on the click of a button generate the key figures that then it's going to the monthly return. I think it's going to save a lot of headache, time, and ensure accuracy of eventually the key output to the FCA, which is the monthly safeguarding returns. The other piece that Vasco mentioned around the scaling, that's also very important. So being able to add with technologies like open banking, for instance, any number of banking accounts across a range of all the key banking partners that you can think of, really. As you open, close different accounts, having or select new banking partners, having a process for logging the due diligence around those accounts and those partners, and being able to scale the system to new currencies, again, new accounts, new ledger systems potentially being integrated to the platform. So as data scales, the platform is able to handle that extra complexity, but keeping the automation in place for running the different reconciliation checks that need to happen on every single reconciliation day. And then again, the automatic case creation and taking those cases through an exception workflow to be managed from there. So yeah, these are kind of definitely some of the key things that we've built into the design of our tool.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, be exciting to hear the feedback from our first clients on it.
Yeah, I do have a question more from the buy-in side. Is like, what do you guys worry about when bringing software into finance and automation and AI? Like, what are your biggest concerns? I mean, I can guess one, which is like finance doesn't forgive wrong numbers, right? Like, it cannot be anything wrong in terms of numbers, and sometimes AI can be a bit scary because there's only you trust yourself and you build your career in finance and what you're doing is right. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. But what are your worries about automation and software and AI when bringing it in?
Like in general, let's start even in-house, out. It doesn't matter. The first part of my answer, it doesn't matter whether you build it in-house and out or procure it. But whenever you're automating, I genuinely think that's the right way to go to make a scalable solution, especially with very, very high volumes of transactions on a daily basis. The more products you have, the more important it is for you to actually embrace automation, because you're more likely to make an error on a manual process at scale than not. And whenever you're doing that, so long as the automation itself is done carefully, with care and detail to make sure that you understand it as a firm, be that in-house or be that the solution. So take the time to understand what is being automated. Does the design of the automation fit with your goals? And therefore, is the design correct? And also built in those trigger points all the time about when things get wrong, have an escalation from the tool, be that in-house or external, and the people to deal with the escalation, right? So know where those breaks can happen or can tend to happen. Maybe design them out. So like change what you're doing as a firm when you find those. But I would say embrace it. Make sure you design it well, or that it is designed well. It fits your business needs. It can scale with you, and have the actual people on the other side picking up any exceptions and validating, are they real, are they not? Do we need to raise an incident? What is the impact? Do I need to involve which level of governance at which point? And have those processes working in harmony to each other. And the other bit I would say is you always retain the accountability regardless of who provides your solution. And you have to go into an external relationship with that mindset. So make sure that you understand what your goals are. It is a bonus if the provider also understands safeguarding requirements. But from my perspective, when we do it in-house, my lead engineers, they understand safeguarding, so they're able to translate and be an effective builder for us because they understand enough of the regulations to be able to write them in code, and they're transparent enough. So having that visibility and transparency is very, very, very important. But if your provider does not have that, you need to provide it to them. So you need someone to tactically be engaged on a day-to-day basis to make sure that the implementation happens correctly.
Yeah, makes sense.
We look at I totally agree with Vasco. The approach is extremely important, and it just highlight of maturity of the company. If you have the right process which allows you to evaluate technology before you start using it, and that process must establish proper, if in case of AI, the proper harness which protects you and your customers' data, then it become your competitive advantage. The same as CASS 15, I believe, is competitive advantage which differentiate your company on the market, because you are capable to maintain the necessary process and tooling, which just highlight your maturity on the market.
Okay, cool. Well, I feel like we discussed a lot of things, and I hope that the people that are listening that found this very insightful. I certainly did, and it was really interesting to hear your side as well. Obviously, being on the builder side, we speak with a lot of clients and a lot of companies, but hearing this firsthand is really useful for us also to build better and better solutions that are highly customizable and that really fit the needs of our clients. So thank you for that. And for the people that are viewing, we do have a chat and the Q&A. So I would open the session to the people that are on the other side. I see that we have one question already. I'm just going to pop it here on the screen. So Harrison asks, what works now might not be the best approach in a few months' time. When do you propose firms review their safeguarding processes after May? Who wants to take it?
So I think there's a twofold element to that. The first is, it's not a one and done. So your MI and your oversight should be constantly reviewing for red flags and errors that are coming through that. But as Vasco was saying earlier, I certainly wouldn't want the first time that I did an audit to be when the formal CASS auditor comes in and they have to do a mandatory report to the FCA. So certainly maybe 6 months in or so, I would be looking for my second or third line to be doing a piece there. Now, recognizing that a vast majority of the firms in the sector don't have internal audit functions or compliance monitoring functions in that way, that's when it's useful to come to a firm like Cosegic. We've built that second line function to augment and co-source those sorts of reviews for firms, and we can test the adequacy and effectiveness of what the firm has built as the rubbers hit the road to ensure that the outcomes are as you expect them to be, and give you a head start against the CASS audit standards as well. So even if you might still have a finding during the review period, but you would be in a stronger position because you'll be able to show to the regulator that you've self-identified and you're actively remediating it.
Say ongoing, always ongoing. So whenever there is a new product, new feature, new anything, apply your existing framework, see how it fits. Is there any scope for development? Have you missed something out because you didn't consider this particular product because it's a new thing? And always refresh. Always go back to your framework, make sure that it's still fit for purpose as the business is changing. It is not a one done and static once annually, review it annually and forget about it. It's something that speaks to a broader culture. Safeguarding is a culture and it needs to be lived and breathed every single day of your oversight.
We have another question from Ritvars. If the internal system is calculating daily balances of safeguarding amounts, can the report be prepared in an Excel printout for sign-off?
I mean, there's nothing prescriptive anywhere around how this works in practice. The reality is that you'll need to have a record. I guess it comes back to that point around, can you edit that record? And once it's approved, it one and done and final. But the main point from my side would be having appropriate records throughout that period.
Yeah.
Yes. Nowhere does it tell you need to perform your reconciliation in an automated way, in Excel, or it doesn't tell you the tooling. It tells you what you need to do. And if you do it with an insolvency mindset in mind and auditability mindset in mind, you're probably on the right tracks.
Yeah, I guess like I said before, the main issue with Excel is that auditability, isn't it? Of can you prove that this is immutable, against use Dmitri's word from before, immutable record that's been timestamped and signed off at a particular point in time, reflecting the correct balances for that day, not something that can be undone and changed later on, back to the source
It's going to be challenging, I believe.
Yeah.
Feasible, but very extremely challenging.
Okay, another question. If you could change one requirement set by the FCA, what would it be?
For Nick, this one.
Yeah, let Vessi go first on that one.
I was going to say, Nick, I think you're part of the cooking team, which are the cooks. So maybe you can have a first go.
I mean, so I understand why the FCA mandated that it has to be a CASS auditor. The imposition of CASS audits was a key driver in changing standards and attitudes when they first rolled out CASS in other sectors. That said, it does present material challenges for the industry and for auditors themselves. So we've talked about the differences in the payments and e-money sector. Being able to have people that genuinely understand payments, what the flows look like, why the firms operate the way they operate, that has a huge benefit. And I think we've lost that, at least over the next few years, while CASS auditors get back up to speed, with consultancies not being able to provide those services in the way they have done previously. The other challenge linked to that, of course, is one of time and cost. So whilst the FCA has tried to limit that burden with the £100,000 threshold for triggering the need for a CASS audit, for a vast number of firms, that's pretty low amount still. So a significant number of firms will be captured. And CASS audits are incredibly time intensive and cost intensive for firms. So there is possibly a proportionality question there that would need to be explored.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, we are right on time, 1 hour. So I want to thank everyone that's, sat with us for this time, and also especially to you guys that you were here, sharing your insights and, educating people on CASS 15. Obviously, there will be a lot of work that people like you will have to do internally, the lobbying and the explaining, the make sure that people are part of the process and not just have a process implemented on them and are, surprised by all the things that need to change and all the things that need to be done. Obviously, if everyone is included, it's much easier to get things to move than to force it into people. Thank you so much to everyone, and I'll speak to you soon. Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye, guys.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for questions. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.